Sentry stratagems. Autonomous turrets often seen as extra teammates due to their sheer ability to decimate dissidents. Bring the right one to the right faction and you have a powerhouse of a stratagem. We'll cover all that in today's video of the best and worst sentries for each faction. There's currently 9 sentry stratagems and 11 ship modules that buff them. Some are pretty minor, an extra 5% cooldown reduction, or an extra 50% ammunition. So I'm using all those ship modules, so keep that in mind when I'm talking about how good these stratagems are. We'll begin with the A-Arc-3 Tesla Tower. Rapidly firing electrical charges that chain to multiple enemies, dealing hefty damage and applying stun buildup, as long as they're close. For bugs, there is no problem in them getting close. It's a moth to a flame, and the way to get mowed down in numbers. 7 kills in one arc, 8 in another. This will be building kill streaks like very few other stratagems can, at least in the sentry department. The only thing you really have to worry about is chargers, titans, and impalers. Based on the planet and terrain, you can deploy Tesla Tower and other sentries on high ground, and chargers are no longer a threat, maybe even impalers. Now your only worry is battle titans. When that happens, it is easily S tier, but it's far and few in between, so I give it a solid A tier instead. Also keeping in mind, Helldivers see that blue light, and they just flock to it. It's a Helldiver to a reinforcement, if you will. For Automatons, it does heaps of damage when it can hit them. And let me tell you right now, it's not very often. Even when placing it around corners and whatnot, they take the long route, and a single rocket strider can one-shot the Tesla Tower. And not just that, you got Scout Striders, Rocket Striders, Devastators, that sit just outside of the danger range, blasting away until it's gone. The value is simply not there. It is genuinely F tier against this faction. On the Illuminate, it handles the hordes of Voteless extremely well. Even when they swarm the tower, they get one zap in the process and the herd thins out fairly quickly. It's also great against Overseers, if they're close enough, and in most cases they will be. Occasionally, a Flying Overseer or Crescent Overseer are sniping a different zip code, but that's your job to handle it. Meat Bobs are the main crux of the tower's survival, and they spawn on all difficulties, but as you go up in difficulty, more can spawn. In some cases, you'll have 4 in a single patrol, and it only takes 2 to overpower the tower. So in that case, your job is to take them out as best you can. But unfortunately, it is far easier said than done, because even stunning them isn't particularly possible once they're enraged. The last major thing to worry about is the height of Tesla Tower. Because it's so tall, it's hard to put it behind objects, and harvesters can snipe it from across the map, and a second of the beam will destroy the tower. So keep that in mind, but if you're diligent enough, you won't place it in a crazy spot. I think for all these reasons, I'd give the tower B tier. Up next, we have a twofer, a 2-for-1. MG43 Machine Gun Sentry and G16 Gattling Sentry. 2 turrets that shoot a bunch of bullets and are equipped with medium armor penetration. The main difference is the Machine Gun Sentry has a lower cooldown as well as a fire rate. And these factors aren't too drastic, but there will be some slight differences for the factions. Against the bugs, it's fantastic as long as chargers, battle titans, and impalers are not running them down. And if you create enough distance between them being placed and the enemies approaching them. For chaff, it will handle that swiftly. Now, if things are too close to it, they do have a tough time figuring out which enemies to go for, particularly the ones that are beating the brakes off them in that very moment. And speaking of that, targeting can be a problem. They'll shoot at enemies through rocks, and fun fact, bullets don't go through rocks, but they do go through enemies. Rounds that pierce enemies are lowered down to light penetration and will likely increase kill times because of how durable damage works with armor rating and whatnot. It's still going to be great against the bugs, and I'd say the Gattling Sentry and Machine Gun Sentry are both A tier. Automatons are a major problem for both these sentries, and it's not the shieldings who reflect bullets and make you waste more ammunition. It's the fact that killing a basic automaton, Billy Bob with a blicky, will have it shoot the ground below it after it dies. That is wasting tons of ammunition constantly. You would probably have upwards of 25%, if not 30% more ammo if it didn't do that. And then factor into it the ability to shoot at hulks for no reason, or war striders, dropships, the engine on a dropship, or try and track the falling automatons out of the sky and missing every shot. It is not a good look. I would say in general, both these sentries are going to be C tier for automatons. Against Illuminate, both these sentries have a saving grace. It's piercing through Voteless, and they're at a certain level where it can go through multiple instead of being angled down at the ground more often than not. Occasionally they get cut in half, and then it does that. but in most cases, you'll be getting a ton of value from the piercing shots. And this also applies to meat bobs. So that is giving you far more damage output than you otherwise would have. I will say the machine gun sentry isn't as good as Gattling due to the lack of DPS output. You need that to take down meat bobs, otherwise they get close and they break it or take focus and it eventually gets broken by something else. For that reason, I'll give machine gun sentry A tier and Gattling sentry S tier. Next we have AC-8 autocannon sentry shooting anti-tank ammunition in a burst of 3 rounds at any enemy it can. This applies to Wilburs all the way up to Battle Titans. Turn speed is rather slow, but the damage output is very high, staggering virtually every enemy it hits. An important note, this is not a chaff clearing stratagem. The goal is to have it target the heavy and elite enemies as often as possible and hit their weak spots when it can. For the bugs, if you're hitting the forehead on Battle Titans and Charger Behemoths, they get dealt with insanely fast. Probably 2 bursts for both of them. And Impalers, it's 1 burst if you're hitting the schmoo spot somehow. When that doesn't happen, it will be chewing through ammunition something serious, and that's if it's targeting those enemies to begin with. I should mention that in group play, Alpha Commanders are not spawning Alpha Warriors as often as they should, so you have far less enemies to deal with. Keep that in mind with how the autocannon is currently performing. It does a decent job of targeting big enemies, but it still gets lost in the sauce. And if you had more things trying to swarm around it, that would only become a bigger issue. Even still, I'll give it a B tier for the bugs. Automatons is where the AC Sentry does pretty good. You don't have as many chaff units, although the numbers are increasing rather drastically, and when there is a bunch of Hulks, it doesn't have to be super accurate to take them out fast. War Striders do require a hefty investment, and if it does target the chaff, you're wasting a lot of ammunition. Thankfully, they travel holding the friendship rope and singing Kumbaya, giving you a lot more collateral damage and making the chaff shots not as detrimental. I'm gonna give that A tier. On Illuminate, the main focus at AC Sentry would be meat bobs and overseers, since harvesters spawn pretty far away. The meat bobs getting blocked by voteless constantly, and when you help out going for jauntile shots, the waste hits, turning them to crawlers, they're still active enemies that the AC Sentry will target over the meat bobs. When it goes for bobs, they require so much damage to take down, it's not looking too good. When you're on higher difficulties, so many spawn, there is simply next to no value for the Sentry. If you toss it away from yourself, it can get some kills, but I think that the burst shot is a detriment to the stratagem entirely. For that reason, I'd give it B. Up next is MLS 4X Rocket Sentry, shooting a tray of rockets one at a time at enemies and primarily focusing larger enemies when doing so. For the bugs, it's pretty nice. You have Chargers, Battle Titans. Those tend to be a bit taller than the majority of other enemies, so they won't have too many shots being blocked. Give it some high ground and let it do work, and it will. That's all I gotta say about it. It's genuinely an A tier stratagem. If it wasn't for Charger Behemoths being so tanky, it'd be S tier. For Automatons, I have a little bit more to say. Rocket Sentry is genuinely 2 teammates, if not 3, built into 1. It is accurate, efficient, the jack of all trades, master of a lot, honestly, in decimating bots. This thing is the mainstay in my loadouts the majority of the time, and it's difficult finding anything else Sentry-wise to replace it, because what else can really compete? I tend to get great results when tossing Rocket Sentry or Autocannon Sentry off to the side and giving them an off angle. This will help them clear out an entire encampment by themselves, and if nothing else, it pulls the attention of certain enemies away from me. For example, Factory Striders. They can get taken out by the Rocket Sentry. If they don't, at least it buys me time to either run away or attack it from a different angle. And in general, I'm seeing more folks taking this Sentry for Automatons, and for good reason. It is S tier against them. Facing Illuminate, it has similar problems to the Autocannon Sentry. The pros are it takes out Volus in a single hit. The cons, it takes you 3 for Overseers in some cases, and meat bobs can require 7 or 8 rockets. I believe it is in the same playing field as the Autocannon Sentry, and for that reason, I'll give it B tier. Next in line is the Flam 40 Flame Sentry, a short-range fire-breathing turret that ignites all enemies hit. When damaged and ruptured, it explodes, leaving behind a small circular AoE of fire for enemies to have a little bit of a parting gift. It recently got buffed and now has 95% fire resistance, up from 0, and a shorter cooldown. I would say for the bugs, it can be useful, but it requires you to place it in a very specific spot. and that's one where it can't get flanked. Give it some high ground and you're now in the perfect situation that still does not yield the greatest results. Bugs can simply run forward even on fire and get some swings off on the flame sentry, since the fire does not pierce them, so the direct damage is only being applied to the person leading the pack. And that's not including the fact that in most cases you can't get this ideal setup and you'll be getting flanked a lot. The moment a clown car of Wilbur's pulls up and starts surrounding the flame sentry, it doesn't know what to do. The barrel's too long, it cannot defend itself on things that are directly on it. It just dies. It just gives up. The low cooldown bumps it up to C tier. For automatons, fire damage is surprisingly effective. Torture, Crisper, Flamethrower, and in this case the Flame Sentry, can melt the majority of bots if they're close enough, or you're close enough to them. If you place it in a decent choke point, which plenty of POIs and bases have those, it can pop off as long as you handle the flanks. And there aren't too many enemy bots approaching from random directions, that won't be too big a deal. If you happen to have any smoke grenades on you, toss Flame Sentry in the distance and smoke it out as it's landing. It'll take some time to actually attack anything, but the enemies will ignore it, run towards you, and that's when it can strike. It's pretty cool. In general, I'd give this a B tier for automatons. Against Illuminate, these same problems for bugs will be noticeable. Lack of range and the inability for fire to pierce targets, leading to faster kill times and letting it target switch more often. Another thing too is when you light enemies on fire, it doesn't switch targets. It continues to mow them down even if the fire would kill them. Boatless get destroyed by a single tick of fire and a smidge of direct damage. But it keeps shooting until the job is done, wasting overall DPS uptime and allowing more enemies to get close to it than otherwise would. If you don't place it directly next to edges of the map, buildings and whatnot, it will not have the advantage it needs to survive, because they will just simply have one guy in front and the rest will go around them. If you find a hole in the city wall and place the Flame Sentry on the outside, lure a ton of voteless, overseers and what have you towards it, they'll get engulfed in the fire, like a moth to a flame. That's one way to get a pretty high kill streak using the stratagem. In totality, I say it's C tier. Next on the docket, we have LES 98 Laser Sentry, firing a heavy armor penetrating laser beam that lights enemies on fire after prolonged exposure to the beam, with a 50 meter range for ground units and 90 meters for air units. And it's equipped with a heat sink. If it fires too long, it'll overheat and explode. For those wondering, after a certain time frame, this sentry, like all others, will go away. So it can't persist forever if you manage the heat sink properly. For Terminids, you can damage every enemy. On paper, that's awesome. But the durable HP poses a problem. Titans, Charge Behemoths, and Chargers require a ton of beamage to the point that you'll waste half a heatsink on those enemies alone, especially the elite and heavy enemies. Now, if you're facing just the chaff, Wilburs, Pouncers, Hunters, and Warriors, it's still wasting more charge and beam than otherwise would be ideal. Apart from the heatsink being so small, lasers apply fire damage, and it does not target switch once enemies that are small enough to be killed by the fire are on fire. This leads to more DPS uptime loss. On the bugs, it's C tier. For automatons, you tend to have fewer enemies, making it far easier to preserve the heatsink charge and not overload it. There are a few grievances though. Shieldens will block the entirety of the laser beam, and there's nothing you can do unless you help shoot it, which would be the wise choice, or it turns for some reason and then the beam can take place. You've also got the dropships that take focus. It can't even begin to damage them, and it wants to try and shoot the engine. It'd be cool if we had higher penetration levels, but instead it's just wasting charge. And then there's tanks. It will focus tanks, even though there's no shot it can damage them unless it's the back of the upper turret or the back of the base of the tank. So it likes to focus on things it can't kill. I love the aesthetics. There's something about seeing a laser taking down gunships that is visually cinematic. It is still going to be C tier. At odds with Illuminate, you begin to realize it can damage and kill every enemy on this faction, but is it worth bringing? The answer is kind of. It depends on if you want to bring it just for the sake of it, but there are better options. For instance, the Gattling Sentry is pretty much a better version of the Laser Sentry in terms of what they can accomplish, since you won't be having that much luck taking down meat bobs or even the harvesters, and the swarm will engulf it. The benefit is at least it won't chew through you if you're downrange. The Laser Sentry does not do that much damage to the point you can't react. The Gattling Sentry will kill you dang near instantaneously. I'ma say it is C tier yet again. Up next is M12 Mortar Sentry, firing a burst of 4 hierarching shells that can hit enemies between 15 and 125 meters away from the mortar itself. These have medium armor pen and can target enemies behind cover. Don't expect precision though, they tend to land in a pretty hefty spread. On the bugs, Mortar Sentry can't keep up. They're quick, spread out. Those are not great things for the Sentry. Even in the description, it's better against slow moving targets. In a perfect scenario, you have Bile Spears and Nursing Spears as your enemy. Raise the flag, a stationary objective you're defending. I toss down the Mortar Sentry and it gets next to no kills because my teammates are killing everything as it spawns. So the 3 seconds of airtime required for the mortar to actually hit something is too much dead airtime. Couple that with the fact that these Mortar Sentry can kill your teammates, it is more of a detriment than it is a benefit. It's technically a -1 stratagem. I tried making it work, defending it. It's borderline impossible. The bugs will destroy it. I'm gonna give it F tier. Against automatons, you may assume it'd be much more useful because they're slower. Except the slow ones now have run animations. Scout Striders, Rocket Striders, they're sprinting across the map. And the fast ones are plenty. Billy Bob with the Blicky, Troopers, Berserkers, Flame Hulks, they are closing the gap. I think I even had a regular Hulk sprinting me down and avoiding all the mortar hits. And even when folks do get in the crossfire of the mortar emplacement, it doesn't guarantee a kill. You can have a Berserker or a Devastator in the middle of that, and they may survive because the spread is so vast. If you can find cover, it should be easier to keep alive unless there's War Striders, because then they'll be mortar striking your mortar emplacement, and it'll die very quickly. I'm going to give it F tier for the bots as well. Illuminate make it very challenging to keep the Mortar Sentry alive. You can toss it in a Narnia, and they're on that thing like white on rice on a paper plate in a snowstorm. Smoke it, and they sniff it out. The one time I tossed in a regular old grenade wall emplacement to block everything from getting to it, I kept it alive for a long time, and the enemies glitched through the map, and when they weren't glitched through the map, it only got maybe 3 kill streaks occasionally. There is borderline no reward, and there is so much more risk than every other Sentry since it can't defend itself. When it wasn't glitched out, it still only got a couple of kills, and there was enemies on it so fast that you can't really manage to keep it alive. It's unequivocally F tier. Next we have M23 EMS Mortar Sentry, launching EMS strikes that stun enemies in place for a duration of time until the field goes away. I'm not going to waste your time. It is D tier on every single faction. At the moment, enemies spawn in from roughly 100 meters away out of thin air, and they tend to walk faster towards you to maintain a faster pace of gameplay loop, I think. And because of that, they will outpace the Mortar Sentry trying to trap them. You also have many more patrols that surround you, so this loses a ton of value if you're not on a specific mission. There's 2 basic ways to improve this Sentry: have it fire faster or increase the radius of the EMS fields it generates. The final rankings for the 9 Sentry stratagems for all factions. Use whatever you like as always, but this is what I'm thinking of currently. Now to go over the ship modules. Advanced construction. With state-of-the-art cyanacrylite adhesives, increase HP or health of all Sentries by 50%. Get this first and foremost. It's hard to do damage when you're not alive. This also applies to your Sentries. Shock absorption gel. Increase ammo for all Sentry stratagems by 50%. Get that one first, actually. Dynamic tracking. All Sentry stratagems launch immediately once called in, reducing overall deployment time. Blast absorption. Sentries take 50% less damage from explosions. If you like playing against automatons, that would be a pretty mandatory thing to have, so Sentries last longer. High quality lubricant. Sentries rotate towards new targets more quickly. It's around a I'd say 25% increase in turn speed. Circuit expansion. Lightning arcs fired from weapons and turrets jump to 1 additional enemy, which applies to Tesla Tower, so if you're using that stratagem, it's pretty good. Synthetic supplementation. Reduce cooldown time for Sentry, emplacement, and resupply stratagems by 10%. It's early in the engineering bay tree, which is pretty cheap to buy. Morale augmentation. Reduce cooldown for all stratagems by 5%, which is not that wild. It's nice, but most people, including myself, don't get the full cooldown regardless, so 5%, it ain't gonna make or break the bank. Enhanced combustion. Fire damage from stratagems increased by 25%, which includes the Flame Sentry, all thanks to a precise formula using the compounds of thermite, white phosphorus, capsaicin, allyl isothiacant, and 19 other accelerants. This is okay. Rapid launch system. All emplacement stratagems launch immediately once called in, reducing overall deployment time, which includes Tesla Tower. This is not nuts though, so don't focus on it heavily. Cross-platform compatibility. Mortar sentries prioritize fire at marked targets. That is a lie and a fib combined into an amalgamation of deceit. It don't work. It don't work that good, if at all. That concludes the tier list for Sentry stratagems. I'll probably be updating this description or comment section with new findings on video links and whatnot, but it most likely won't be a full-on tier list unless they make some drastic changes, because this took a year and a day. The talking was the most difficult part though. Hours saying a single minute of audio. Anywho, thanks for watching. Have a good day. Bye.